Passion, though. We got to go. See you later.
Straight to a Fox News alert. Horror as a food festival ends in murder. A gunman opening fire seemingly at random.
Oh my God! They shooting! They are shooting!
They were shooting. At least 3 people are dead. At least 15 others have been hurt. The gunman killed by police.
Police say one of the people who died was a 6-year-old little boy. Let's get right to Claudia Cowan, who is live at the scene in Gilroy, California, as the hunt for that second possible suspect is now ramping up. Good morning, Claudia.
Yeah, good morning, guys. That's right. As this manhunt continues for a possible accomplice, we are starting to hear from some of the survivors of yesterday's mass shooting. And what we are hearing is only described as absolute chaos. And when you see these pictures, you can really understand why they would describe it that way. Thousands of people, including a lot of kids, were enjoying the final day of the annual Gilroy Garlic Festival when witnesses say a man with a rifle opened fire, stopped to reload, and then fired again. Some say they heard as many as 50 shots fired. People ran for their lives to escape the gunfire. According to one eyewitness, the shooter, described as a tall, thin young man wearing camouflage, appeared calm as he fired at random.
He had a semi-automatic, like an AK. Yeah, he had a rifle. He had a long gun.
Oh my God.
So he was able to shoot off 3-4 shots a second.
Gilroy police were already at the festival providing security, and they killed the suspect in, they say, less than a minute. According to one eyewitness, when someone asked why he was shooting at people, the gunman shouted something about being angry. Now, there are metal detectors at the festival's entrances, but police say that the gunman broke into this venue by cutting through a back fence and getting into the venue area that way. Police have not released any information about the victims, nor have they identified the gunman or discussed any possible motive. Back to you, New York, for now.
All right. Claudia, tell us a little bit about the security, because I was reading this morning in the LA Times that apparently the security was described as weak in some instances where they did check some bags, did not check others. They may have been a metal detector or something like that.
There are metal detectors that people are supposed to pass through. People also have wands in some cases, and their bags are checked. Some witnesses talk about going through and they weren't checked as closely as they perhaps had been in past years, but there is security in effect, and you heard the police chief say there were many officers patrolling the area. They've had trouble at this festival in the past with biker gangs, things like that, so there is a very heavy security at this garlic festival, but obviously the gunman and his perhaps accomplice used a tool to cut through a back perimeter fence. Yeah. We do know that there was no fixed video surveillance cameras, so police are asking people who may have taken video or pictures to call them, because that could be critical photographic evidence in this ongoing investigation.
I imagine police can only do so much, though, when you have a festival out in the middle of a field.
It is a soft target. You're absolutely right, Ainsley, and the police can only do so much, but they try to make it as safe and secure as possible. This festival, I can tell you, has been going on for many decades, and it is popular. It is a huge tourist draw. It is important to this town. We heard the executive director of the festival share his heartbreak that this happened at such a fun and family-friendly event. So this community is going to have to really think about how to step up security at this event moving forward following this tragedy.
Claudia, where is Gilroy? What big city is it near?
Well, if you are driving from San Jose or the Bay Area down to Monterey Carmel, you are driving through Gilroy. And obviously they grow a lot of garlic and other produce, and it's a agricultural rich region of Central California. But we have an area that is just south, about 30 miles south of San Jose, about 80 miles south of San Francisco, and more towards Central California.
All right, Claudia Cowan reporting live from California. Santa Clara County is regarded as the capital of the garlic capital of the world. And that's why they've been doing it for
Go to see that. You go to hear a little music, and
I know. You
they
take
say she says she speculated someone cut through the fence. You can't control for all that.
No, you can't. And there was this little kid who was there with his parents, I imagine. You go there for Sunday afternoon fun with the family, a little music.
Yeah, we've all been there. You think of the mentality you're in that moment.
The guys on the stage had to hide underneath the stage. They were in the middle of their set. They were playing their music.
And now they're looking for perhaps an accomplice. So we will keep you posted on that. In the meanwhile, Pete, you had a busy weekend. The president was out tweeting on Saturday. He tweeted about Elijah Cummings, who last week was there at the House Oversight Committee. And according to Mick McElvaney, the chief of staff, the president didn't like the fact that Elijah Cummings was saying things that he regarded as lies. During Kevin McAleenan's hearing, Mr. Cummings was talking about kids sitting in their own feces, and the president disputed that, said, and essentially Mr. Mulvaney said, he hasn't been down to our southern border during this administration, so we don't know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, president saying, look, you can't criticize what's happening at the border because what's happening at the border looks better than what's happening in your area of Baltimore. He tweeted this out. He said, there is nothing racist in stating plainly what most people already know, that Elijah Cummings has done a terrible job for the people of his district and of Baltimore itself. Dems always play the race card when they are unable to win with facts. Shame.
Yeah, and there's been, of course, the predictable uproar. And also, we spent over the weekend a lot of time looking at residents and get some video from residents saying, go to West Baltimore. It's not in good shape, unfortunately, whether it's crime, whether it's trash, whether it's rat problems. And the president pointing out that if you're going to come after me, if you're going to get in the mud and impugn my administration, you better look in your backyard as well. And that's exactly what he's done over a series of tweets. But, guys, the reaction a bit predictable from the left.
Right. The president is a racist. Just watch.
The president is, as he usually is or often is, disgusting and racist.
This is beyond racism. This is the work of a serious sociopathic demagogue.
Our president has a hate agenda. He doesn't have a policy agenda.
It's important for us to call it out for what it is, which is racism. There's a pattern here. This guy is the biggest identity politician, that he engages in what's known as racial priming.
Well, since then, there have been a number of news articles that have pointed out, wait a minute, people have criticized Baltimore in the past, and it was not regarded as racist. For instance, here is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders in Elijah Cummings' district back in 2015.
Walked through it. Yep.
And he said this about that area.
Anyone who took the walk that we took around this neighborhood would not think you're in a wealthy nation. You would think that you were in a third world country. What we're talking about is a community in which half of the people don't have jobs. We're talking about a community in which there are hundreds of buildings that are uninhabitable.
You can imagine the outrage if President Trump had used the phrase, it's like a third world country, which is exactly what he said. He went on to say, Bernie Sanders, the poorest boroughs in Baltimore have lifespans shorter than folks under the North Korean dictatorship, simply pointing out the fact that Democrats have failed inner cities, whether it's health, whether it's education, sanitation, opportunities. And you point out, well, why aren't you in support of, if you're Elijah Cummings, why aren't you in support of these economic opportunity zones?
Sure.
Or vouchers or charter schools that lift people out of poverty? It's a pretty straightforward policy argument, but of course they always make it about race.
The president was wondering, where is this money that our federal government has given to that area? What's Elijah Cummings spending this money on if the area is not improving? But Barack Obama also was in that area and made some observations in 2015. This is what he said at the White House when he was president. He said some of the same organizers now going back into these communities to try to clean up in the aftermath of a handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place.
And that he's referring to the civil unrest and the riots in Baltimore after the death of Freddie Gray. So what do you think about this? Let us know. Friends at FoxNews.com. Rush Limbaugh is going to be joining us a little later on in the program, and he would like to weigh in on those comments.
But you guys mentioned the border. It hasn't just been a debate about Baltimore recently. As far as things go on the southern border, it's been a heck of a week if you believe in border enforcement, and the Democrats have been unwilling to work with this president over his agenda. But things have been happening anyway, in case you weren't paying attention.
Are you talking about the president has been winning on several different fronts?
Just a few different items, yes.
For instance?
Yeah, the Supreme Court, 5-4, late night, Friday, said that the president's plan to use some military funding for about 100 miles of border wall can go through.
Then there's also this agreement with Guatemala. The president of Mexico met with the president of Guatemala and said, we are going to help you. We're going to help if you can claim asylum in the next country you're in, and we're going to try to prevent you from having to go all the way to the United States to declare asylum.
Right, and if you do come to the United States, we're going to send you back to Guatemala to wait for your asylum claim.
And then yesterday we reported on the fact that Mexico and Honduras had reached an agreement where Mexico hopes to help Honduras create up to 20,000 jobs. It remains to be seen exactly how that would happen. But
through the coffee farmers, they say.
Yes, they did. Think about you've already got Mexico putting National Guard troops up to 20,000 in their country to help secure the border. Now they're working with another country near them to help spur their economic development to prevent the incentives for migration. But that third country status piece in Honduras is incredibly important. Right. Ultimately, everyone's flowing through there. If that's the place they ask for asylum for the United States and they wait there before they make the perilous trek through Mexico, you could see a serious reduction in the amount of people making that dangerous.
Well, the president in Honduras is working with the president of Mexico to come up with this plan to create the jobs, because he says, why are people fleeing my area? He said, because it's violence. There's so much violence. There's so much poverty. I'm going to try to rebuild our government to try to create jobs so that people won't want to leave.
Well, keep in mind, it seems like a couple of months ago, but it was just in the month of June that the president threatened tariffs against Mexico unless they stepped up and started helping out. Well, they've stepped up and they've started helping out. And Kevin McAleenan, the acting DHS secretary, says, you know what? The number of people who are being apprehended at our southern border is going down profoundly.
Back in May, we were apprehending about 4,650 people a day at that southern border. Now that number is about 2,600. So we've had a significant drop, 28% in June, another 20+% in July so far. And that's due to two administration initiatives: engaging our international partners in Mexico and Guatemala in particular. Mexico has stepped up and addressed security on their southern border between Chiapas and Guatemala and the transportation routes that smugglers are using.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say a serious reduction, but still, the administration would like to see it ultimately at zero.
Of course. No thanks to Democrats. Ultimately, without the willingness to take an executive action, to threaten tariffs, to commit to the border wall and wait all the way for the Supreme Court decision, this crisis would be growing even more. So here we are with a reduction. It's early. It's also the summer. Some of those numbers can affect that. But a good sign in that.
I imagine the president sitting down with his team and saying, all right, Congress is not going to act on this. How do we go around them and fix this problem? Let's do it the best we can. And then he did the emergency funding for the wall. The Supreme Court is now voting in his favor. He's working with other countries. He's slapping tariffs on Mexico if they don't help. So he's doing a great job. And many conservatives would say when it comes to the border.
And just keep in mind, the Gallup poll that came out last week said that the number one concerning issue for most Americans is what's going on our southern border. Indeed. All right. So it is a busy Monday, and Carly joins us today.
Hey, that's right. Good morning, guys. We begin with this tragic story here. A family is speaking out as a search for a suspected cop killer intensifies. Off-duty LAPD officer Juan Diaz murdered early Saturday morning after confronting a vandal. The fallen officer's sister telling a crowd of mourners, quote, "I just want to remind everyone that these people are putting their lives out there for us. They're more than a badge. They're human beings." The suspect has not been identified. An investigation is underway after an American teen accused of murdering an Italian police officer is blindfolded, which is illegal under Italian law. A commander claims it was done to keep Gabriel Christian Natale Hior from seeing documents related to his investigation. The 18-year-old and classmate Finnegan Lee Elder were on vacation in Rome when police say they killed Mario Cerciello Rega following a drug deal gone wrong. Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe thanks President Trump overnight for tapping him as the next U.S. intelligence director. Ratcliffe tweeting in part, "I am deeply grateful to President Trump for the opportunity to lead our nation's intelligence community and work on behalf of all the public servants." Ratcliffe will replace Dan Coats, who resigned. His last day is August 15th. Take a listen to this. A mom buys out an entire shoe store to help people in need. Carrie Jernigan taking home nearly 1,500 pairs of shoes from a Payless that was closing in Arkansas. Jernigan didn't say how much she paid, but she will give them to children in need as they head back to school next month. We love that story. Those are your headlines, guys.
That's neat. And she had her kids with her. What a great
fantastic. So true.
Never thought about going into a store and buying the whole thing. Good for her.
I know.
All right. Thanks, Carly.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, the second Democratic debate now just one day away, and the focus is going to be on policy.
It's tomorrow, and we are breaking down ideas from some of the top contenders next.
Could be said on the debate stage over the next couple of nights, right?
Yeah, that's right. Particularly Joe Biden is going to have to apologize for the sin of being in the world too long. So a lot of his policies are going to be designed to preemptively combat those criticisms.
In particular, he was involved in the 1994 crime bill, which he has taken a lot of heat for. And so now he's come out with a criminal justice plan that would, among other things, we've got him over on the big board, reduce incarceration, eliminate the death penalty and mandatory minimum sentencing, and eliminate discrepancies in sentencing between powder and crack cocaine, as well as end cash bail. So he's putting that out there so he doesn't have another awkward moment as he did last time with Kamala Harris, right?
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting about his plan and some of the details is that he is going to have to try hard to distinguish himself from what President Trump is already doing. Recall that last year, at the end of last year, President Trump and Congress signed a criminal justice reform bill. And some of the provisions in Joe's bill, in particular, reducing or eliminating long sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, right. President Trump is literally already doing this. So how is he going to distinguish himself from the policies that the president's already implementing? They don't call him Sleepy Joe for nothing, so he's going to have to come up with some new answers.
Well, one of the other things that will make him unique on the debate floor is the fact that most of the people there are for Medicaid for all, whereas he has to support the Affordable Care Act because that's part of his legacy.
Yeah, that's right. And you're really seeing him double down on this. His health care bill or his health care proposal really goes after Obamacare. All it does is expand these policies that we know are failing. 1.4 million people have lost their health insurance since 2016. Joe Biden's answer is to say, hey, let's do more of this. When a car's already driving off a cliff, it's not the best policy idea to keep pushing it. And that's sort of where Joe Biden finds himself on health care.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has come out with the Water Justice Act. She was in Michigan for the NAACP convention last week, I do believe. And of course, it's not too far from Flint, Michigan, where they've had terrible water problems in the past. So she's talking about investing a lot of water money into clean and safe drinking water programs, a priority given to high-risk communities like Flint, drinking water infrastructure emergency, and $50 billion toward communities and schools where water is contaminated. That all sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
It does, but I would point out that all of these programs existed before the Flint water crisis. None of them prevented what happened, and we know why now. We know that all of this was because of gross incompetence at the city and the state level. The task force charged with investigating this put the blame squarely on water officials at the state level, the governor's office, and the city. So how are these programs going to actually solve anything when they couldn't solve it in the first place? Classic Democrat tactic, throwing more money at programs that we know have failed.
Okay, so these are some of the policies that they're hoping will shield them from criticism. But at the same time, they've got to say something on the debate stage, all of them, to stand out. Because the morning after the debate, that's when, the race to the next debate goes and who's going to wind up with the most buzz this time, as Kamala Harris did last time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the raise your hand moments. I think that's really where we start to see just how far to the left this Democrat Party has swung. If you recall, the last time around, it was for open borders. Every single one of them raised their hands. Who wants to eliminate private medical insurance, which goes even further than systems in Canada and the United Kingdom? We saw a lot of hands raised for that, including Kamala Harris, who then tried to walk it back the next day.
That's right. Can I see the hands of people who would like Rachel to join us again tomorrow? Well, you're gonna, because you're going to profile more candidates, in particular Beto O'Rourke and Elizabeth Warren. So we'll see you then. All right.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. All right. Meanwhile, 624 here in New York City, where police officers are under siege. And now a former New York City Police Department chief is blaming the mayor, and he wants action. That also suspected of murdering a college lecturer. Police are focusing on a small town in rural Canada where a volunteer group thinks they spotted the pair at a landfill. And the woman set to become Puerto Rico's next governor doesn't want the job. Justice Secretary Wanda Vazquez is next in line to replace Ricardo Rossello. He resigned last week following major backlash over leaked text messages. Vazquez says she also asked Rossello to pick somebody else. We will keep you posted on that. All right, Ainsley.
That's interesting. Thanks so much. Well, New York City police now searching for all of the people behind the string of the water bucket attacks on the officers. Watch this.
Yo, they violated them. Oh, they not stop.
And while New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio spoke out against the attacks, one former NYPD chief says it's just not enough.
Chief Louis Anemone served with the NYPD for over 35 years and is credited with helping to drive down crime in our city to record lows back in the 90s when Giuliani was mayor. Chief Anemone joins us now. Good morning, Chief. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
No matter how many times we look at the video, it's still hard to watch. We're all cringing when we watch it.
It's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's a danger to the police. It's an absolute danger.
Where does this start? Does it start with a culture created by the mayor? How do things like this happen?
Question?
No, I want to know, yeah. Is that where it comes from, though,
Listen,
leadership?
He's the chief executive of the city of New York, the largest city in this country. He has not taken the lead for security, for public security, and for supporting the police. Since day one, he's been behind, way behind.
You served 35 years. Thank you so much for that. And then you retired. You grew up in Brooklyn, raised your family in Rockland County. What do you think Rudy Giuliani would have done if this had happened then?
This never would have happened because Rudy had his finger on the pulse of the city. He knew. We're seeing now things occurring at a rapid pace, and they're all defining deviancy down rather than up. We're seeing more and more uncivil behavior in the city, and the mayor has got to take the lead on this.
What do you say to the men and women wearing the badge today? They're in that neighborhood. Maybe the mayor doesn't have their back. How do they respond?
So he doesn't have their back. I believe firmly that he does not have their back. The thing about being a policeman in New York City or anywhere in this country, we take an oath. It's not a job. You swear an oath. I'm wearing the symbol here on my lapel of the New York City Police Department Honor Legion. Their motto is Fidelis ad mortem, which in Latin translates to, in English, faithful till death. So if you're a policeman and you're afraid of what the mayor may say, what the department may say, what the public may say about your actions, you're in the wrong profession. Gosh. You've got to do what you have to do because you took an oath.
You took that oath when you were 18 years old. You worked your way all the way up to become the chief.
I did.
How did we get to where we are now, where people are laughing? There were even kids in front of what looked like definitely adults, maybe their parents, I don't know, throwing buckets of water on the. Look at this. There's a little kid that comes up right there. How did we get here?
So you have older kids setting and older parents setting the example.
Right.
And this is okay now. And I'd like to just turn this around for those politicians in the city who haven't stepped forward and helped the mayor. And for the mayor himself, would he like or would any of them like to start their day after their hair is done and their makeup and their dress and their suits are on and have someone pour a bucket of water on them and then tell them, go to your meeting, finish your work day,
you're totally right about the oath. But if you're that officer and you take the necessary action, sometimes aggressive in a situation like that, you're defending yourself, you're the next person on the cover of the newspaper about to be thrown in jail for that.
Pete, it takes a little bit of intestinal fortitude, but you don't have to worry about taking action. What you have to do with a strong command voice is say, you're under arrest, and then put your hands on him. And if you need additional help, you use your radio to call for it, or your partner will do that. But you don't ever not take action.
Chief,
you don't ever turn around and walk away from a situation like that.
We all did wonder that, but some people said because the cops in Brooklyn, they were so young, they had just gotten out of the academy, and they're walking, they're on
being taught
pins and needles.
No, if that's the case, if anyone is teaching them that, that's absolutely criminal. From the time I was an 18-year-old trainee, we were taught and we were trained. You never back down. You never turn around and walk away. You have plenty of help out there. You take the action that's required. People, heroes have worn that uniform, died in that uniform. This is a disgrace.
It's the opposite of the broken windows theory
The
that you
absolute
operated
opposite.
under. Absolutely.
Chief, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
service. and for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Yes, God bless you. President Trump's tough talk on Baltimore getting called out by a local newspaper saying it's better to have a few rats than to be one.
Well, how do they explain an op-ed in their own paper saying President Trump is right when he declared it a disaster nearly 3 years ago? Dan Bongino sounds off on the hypocrisy.
Shooting! They are shooting!
They were back with the Fox News Alert. People running for their lives as a gunman opens fire at a popular food festival over the weekend in California.
3 people are dead and 15 others are injured. Police say the gunman appeared to fire at random after he snuck into that festival by cutting a hole in the fence.
Officers responded in less than a minute, shooting and killing the gunman. They're now searching for a possible second suspect. A motive remains unknown.
Let's bring in Dan Bongino, Fox News contributor, former New York City police officer, Secret Service guy, author of Spygate, the attempted sabotage of Donald J. Trump. Dan, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. You know, these images out of California are so troubling. It was a soft target to start with. It doesn't sound like security was it wasn't like going to the airport because they didn't apparently check everybody's bags. But this guy wasn't even going to chance that. He just cut a hole in the fence in the back and snuck in.
Sure. And first, I'd like to salute those brave police officers. You know, when those problems start, they're the only ones running towards it. And I think everybody needs to remember that on days like today. This is what our cops do. You know, they don't get paid to give traffic tickets. They're getting paid, but they get paid because one day they may be the ones facing down a gunman like they did. So a salute to them. Yeah, there's a couple of takeaways here, Steve. The first one is, you know, you're only as good as a patrol on your perimeter. You know, perimeters, whatever they may be, a fence. We used to use pipe and drape in the Secret Service, which is literally just a piece of fabric. They're obstructions, but they're not designed to be foolproof. You have to have someone actually watching them because this is the kind of thing that can happen. You can breach them very easily, or you can just, with a fence, you can climb right over it. That principle applies pretty much everywhere. Secondly, you know, gun-free zones are inherently dangerous. I've been calling these out for a long time now on this network. You're guaranteeing yourself an unarmed target base here where people can't fire back. Thank God those police officers were present to engage and stop this maniac before it got worse than it did. Right.
They were there within less than a minute. And it's really hard, I imagine, to patrol a big area like that, like a state fairground. I mean, that's really difficult. That's why they cut through the fence. But Dan, to your point,
it is difficult.
Well, to your point, talking about how brave our police officers are, I'm watching that video of the police officers out in the field, and they're searching for the second suspect. And I'm thinking, oh my word, how terrified they must be. This guy could be hiding in the woods. They know that, you know, someone that was there at the fair they asked him, why are you doing this? And the shooter said, because I'm angry. So these guys don't care who they're shooting. And so those police officers are putting themselves in harm's way. They're out in the middle of a field. They could be shot at any second.
Yeah, and remember, I mean, obviously, reaction is always going to be slower than action. The danger of approaching a gunman who's already shown a proclivity for being a savage killer, you already know he's willing to engage. If you creep up on him, he knows you're creeping up on him because he's watching you. You're not watching him. He's hiding. And that reaction is always going to be slower than the action. Again, it speaks to the incredible bravery of the officers there who engaged with with this maniac.
Dan, we got to get your thoughts on another story. Our folks may not know you ran for Senate in Maryland, talked a lot about Baltimore, understand Baltimore. Well, there's a feud going on between Elijah Cummings and the president about conditions there. The Baltimore Sun, the newspaper of record in that town, had a headline on Saturday based on this back and forth. It wrote, "Better to have a few rats than to be one," a not-so-veiled reference at the president of the United States. But we did some searching of previous headlines, Dan, at the Baltimore Sun. Turns out they really do have a rat problem. Another headline from November 18th of 2014, Baltimore's rat hotspots. And if you go fast forward to 2016, right after the election, the Baltimore newspaper said Trump's right. Declare Baltimore a disaster and rebuild it. So they're going after him today, Dan, but you know that city, and they know that city. They know there's some serious problems there.
You know, Pete, one of the things that inspired me to run for office when I did in Maryland was the condition of Baltimore. I was a street cop in New York, and I was a federal agent in the city of Baltimore, arresting a whole lot of people for a lot of bad things. I would say to the president and anyone else right now, don't you dare run away from this argument. This argument is long overdue. The people in Baltimore are good people. These are decent, quality people. I remember being a cop in New York City in one of the worst precincts in the city, the 7-5 precinct, and people coming up to me and tapping me on the shoulder and saying, please, do something about this guy on the corner. He's slinging drugs. Just don't tell him I said anything. This would happen over and over again. The people in our inner cities, these are good people who have been let down by who? And this is why don't dare liberals run away from this. Don't you dare. And Mr. President, please, God, keep the heat on them. Liberals have destroyed and decimated these cities. They have been a forest fire. You know, Pete, in the 1950s, Baltimore was one of the wealthiest cities in America. It has been driven into the ground by monopolistic liberal control. The government did this to people. There is nothing wrong with the citizens of Baltimore. These are people looking for safety and prosperity. And thank God the president brought the heat to these Democrat politicians who have destroyed those cities. When is the accountability going to start? It better start now. Don't dare run away from this argument. Anyone. It's long overdue.
I do believe Nancy Pelosi's own father was once upon a time the mayor of Baltimore.
D'Alessandro.
But what do you make of the fact that so many are looking at the president's comments and they're saying, regarding Elijah Cummings and Baltimore, and they're saying, this is racist?
Listen, I don't even want to hear it. That's garbage. Not from you, Steve. That is total, complete, steaming pile of dog on your porch. That's garbage. Whenever liberals can't defend their position, which they can't, Steve, they've run Baltimore since the 1930s. They haven't had an elected city councilman who's a Republican in Baltimore in 70 years. What's their defense going to be? The Republicans did this? So what do? They scream, you're a racist, you're a misogynist, you're an istophobic, phobophobe. Any word with an ist or a phobe at the end, you are. Ignore that. Nobody pays attention to these idiots anymore anyway with this racist stuff. They've diluted the word so much, Steve. The sad part is actual racists may get away with it because liberals call everybody a racist. Nobody cares what they say. They have driven this city into the ground. You hear what I just said? They have not had an elected Republican on the city council, I believe, since the 30s. Fact check me if I'm wrong, folks. The show has millions of viewers. You can check it out, too. Who did this? The Republicans? What are you going to do? Blame it on the people of Baltimore? How racist is that? Oh, what are you going to say? They're incapable of prosperity? No, I assure you, they were very prosperous once. You did this, the libs. And of course they're going to say the president's racist because their fear right now, Steve, is the national conversation is going to change and a bunch of people are going to start looking and go, wait, who did destroy Baltimore? It wasn't Donald Trump. He was busy building up New York, building buildings up there, while Democrats were busy tearing down the great city of Baltimore. That's a fact. You could put a stamp on that sucker.
a lot of these Democrats are trying to tear down our president. Nancy Pelosi was critical of him. You have Elizabeth Warren was critical about his tweets. And then Jerry Nadler, he takes it even further. He now wants to, or continues to want to impeach. Listen to this.
President for winning an election. That's it. He doesn't have any evidence of any crime anywhere. And he thought, as they said, well, if they didn't read the Mueller report, they'd see the movie in the proceeding. That was the Democrat line they were using, being led by Jerry Nadler. And the movie blew up, got, a 1% score on Rotten Tomatoes. So now Nadler's embarrassed. He's been embarrassed repeatedly by President Trump because he's trying to fabricate a crime. So what does he do? Instead of just walking away humbly, head in hand, he's trying to double down to salvage the remnants of his already broken